The following is a presentation of Molestar Sports and Entertainment.
Everybody, I'm Chris McClure. Welcome to Speed with Style 1997. Our look back at the PPG Kart World Series, a 17-race dash to glory that literally covered the globe. It was a season that gave us more individual winners than 1996. It was also a season that saw more tire, engine, and chassis combinations presented for competition than at any time in recent memory. And many of those combinations did pay a winning dividend. It was a season in which a valued veteran led the championship for 3 months, then did not win it, while an enthusiastic Italian stepped to the front and captured the title, all the while tempting fate and trying the patience of both colleagues and mentors. It saw a variety of first-time winners, not just drivers, but chassis builders, and it saw former winners capture some new charms. It was a season with a lot of changes, and it was less contentious than in 1996. But at the end, it was the tried and true, beneath the familiar livery of Target Chip Ganassi Racing, that earned the strut. It all began at Homestead, where the personality and variety of the season was born, in the renewed quest for open-wheel racing's holy grail, the PPG Cup. The Test of Miami involves 1.5 miles with 4 left turns, the first of 7 oval assignments PPG Cup candidates would face during the new campaign. 1996 Rookie of the Year Alex Zanardi drew first blood, scoring pole and leading the first 31 laps, sometimes by as much as 4.5 seconds. Michael Andretti in a brand new Swift started 14th, but moved quickly into contention. He wasn't the only one on the move. By lap 32, Gilles de Ferran had moved from 3rd into position to get by suddenly struggling Zanardi. He did that and stood comfortably on point for the next 37 circuits of the course, while Zanardi's day got worse. He still was there when Scottish rookie Dario Franchitti took a wild ride into the barrier with his Hogan-prepared machine, a savage-looking crash that called out the first yellow of the season. Franchitti escaped unscathed and further educated.
And, you know, before that I hadn't even seen an oval track, or I'd only been to the States once a long time ago, so it was all a bit different, all a bit new. And to go out there, you know, we did 2 days testing on a road course and then straight onto the oval at down there at Homestead. It took a bit of getting used to.
On the restart, de Ferran got further used to leading, at least for a while, then traffic did him in. The lane under Dennis Vitolo wasn't there, leaving the lead as only a fond memory as they both sat at the side of the road. Suddenly it looked like a Michael Andretti day. He'd inherited first position, and the talented veteran held it firmly in his grasp until the next round of pit stops. That allowed Paul Tracy to lead 4 laps, but about then Max Pappas' equipment gave up. Tracy had to pit, and another yellow flag flew over the field. That only delayed a magic moment for Michael. He timed the restart flawlessly and stormed to his 36th career victory astride a brand new chassis named Swift. It marked the first victory for an American-made car since Gordon Johncock drove a Wildcat to the checkered flag in Atlanta in 1983. Michael was hardly alone in savoring it all.
Oh, it was a huge moment, you know, for the team. I felt so good for everybody involved in the project, because I know how hard they worked, starting with when the project started. It just, I mean, it was a huge undertaking for the team, and those guys just burned the midnight oil every night for 6-7 months, and it was really happy for them that they were able to get that result.
Paul Tracy held on for second in the new Penske car, while defending PPG Cup and Homestead champion Jimmy Vasser also finished on the podium. The points, of course, lined up exactly as they had finished the race.
A month later in Australia, the varied combination trend expanded in a timed two-start event. Start 1 saw Alex Zanardi storm from his second pole of the year for the early lead. He was pulling well clear of the field over the opening 2 laps before a truly frightening crash for Brazilian Christian Fittipaldi. It put Fittipaldi on the sidelines for nearly 3 months with a broken leg. Amazingly, when the car started to get away at Surfers Paradise, Christian suspected the worst.
When I looked at the wall, I remember seeing the stands also in front of me, and I said, oops, this is going to be a big one today. And I was really, at that point, I was afraid of getting hurt. And I said, I think today I'm going to get hurt, because I realized the speed that I was doing and the angle that I was going to hit the wall. And it was pretty much like a big head-on impact.
The red flag for Fittipaldi meant the race ran 8 laps short of the scheduled distance. On the restart, Zanardi pulled away again. But again, they did not sustain race speed very long. More tangles on the twisty Surfers course. Brian Herta and Walter Salas went first, then a couple more. Richie Hearn and Michel Jourdain Jr. launching short yellows and some more delay. And just about then, Al Unser Jr. lost a wheel and wound up in a plume of flame and smoke. His day finished with 27th place, the most unwelcome reward. Under the green on lap 18, 2 warriors with short fuses. Amid plumes of blue smoke, Paul Tracy snatched the lead from Zanardi and pulled away briskly. They would meet again before the day was done, but not before more fireworks. Whipsawing to the right under braking, Parker Johnstone found the side of Brian Herta's race car while gathering up Mark Blundell. Johnstone offered Herta help after the fact. Juan Manuel Fangio also retired. His Phoenix-like Toyota decided to consume itself. Back at speed, Paul Tracy demonstrated exactly how one can straighten out a chicane. Not an owner's favorite sort of maneuver, but he nailed it on that occasion, and next time through he nailed a cone, but was able to continue. Apparently, Zanardi had enough of those shenanigans just in front of him. He decided to take the lead back and got it, but only for a matter of seconds. Even though it's 3rd and short, Tracy decided to punt, breaking his car before both of them went sailing off into the tire barrier. Everyone else drove through with Scott Pruitt, the new leader. Zanardi sought and got some help along the side of the road from the cracked kart safety team, while Tracy stepped away safely amid concern from all quarters. Out of tires and on his way again, Zanardi was able to salvage 4th down under, a dozen points that would pay handsome dividends later in the year. Up front, Scott Pruitt and Greg Moore settled in for the final dozen laps, running 1-2 and fairly content to hold station to the checker. And Pruitt did it in his teammate's backup car, in a combination that neither he nor his new wife Judy ever dreamed about on their wedding day.
Mid to late January, first part of February, we basically left our Lolas behind and made a change to Reynard. So that was a lot of understanding that we had to really get geared up on, to get the car up to speed, to get the information, to get the understanding of how the cars worked, and with that, so going down there, we weren't quite sure, but luck was with us and the opportunity was there, and we capitalized on it.
It was the second career triumph for Scott Pruitt, standing alongside his victory in the 1995 500 at Michigan. His margin of victory over second-year driver Greg Moore was well less than a second, while Michael Andretti grabbed his second podium of the year in the Swift. And that was enough to keep Andretti atop the points. Pruitt jumped 3 spots, Moore gained 1, Zanardi picked up, and Tracy fell back. Gilles de Ferran's Long Beach pole stopped Alex Zanardi's record streak at 6th. There was early trouble for Roberto Moreno in car 11. He continued. De Ferran led through lap 25, yielding to Raul Boesel, who stayed out when everyone else pitted. His battle for the lead was against Alex Zanardi in particular. As he worked on lapping Zanardi, teammate Jimmy Vasser, who did fight off the Brazilian until Boesel had to pit. When Boesel checked in for service, Zanardi swept to the lead, where he would march on point for nearly 50 miles, and the brilliant Italian also caught a break. Just as he got the lead, Max Pappas' failed engine brought out the yellow, catching Boesel in a most awkward position. For a half-dozen laps after the restart, Zanardi was under heavy pressure from de Ferran back in second and Vasser, who'd gotten all the way around to run third. A battle that momentarily ceased when Roberto Moreno slid a shade too far to the right and pitched to the left. His second offline excursion as a substitute for the injured Christian Fittipaldi. By lap 69, Zanardi was short of fuel, and his pit stop touched off a flurry of lead changes. Changes that again demonstrated how tough it is in kart these days.
Right open, right on the money, you're doing great. Weekend in, weekend out, there's about 10 people that
can go out there and win the race. It really depends on the very weekend you're on, you know, how competitive and how good you can be that weekend.
When you get in the race car and you put down the shield, you're always giving 110% and doing everything you can to extricate everything out of that car that you can, and to work with it and try to make it better.
DeFerent's pit stop shipped the lead back one space to Raoul Boisel. Vassar was slashing along in second with Gilles DeFerent still in sight for another shot. Out of sequence, Boisel had to duck in so his Patrick Racing colleagues could do their stuff. That left it to Vassar to handle a leader's pressure. He did that just fine for 18 miles. It didn't hurt him when Gilles DeFerent's misstep eased the pressure just a little bit. For the second year in a row, DeFerent was in position for a win at Long Beach and saw it slip away at the last possible moments.
It was very disappointing because, you know, it's a race that I had high hopes for, and things seemed to be going quite well right up until that point.
Immediately after that point, Vassar pitted, handing the race back to Zanardi, a man who admitted later that he hardly had the best car, he just had the best pit service and perhaps the best bit of luck on a difficult day. Over the course of the final 12 laps, he never put a foot wrong and wound up leading nearly half the race, including the ever-so-crucial final trip around. Australia winner Scott Pruitt got to the podium again with Mauricio Gugelmin a dozen seconds ahead in second. Al Unser Jr. bounced back, and Parker Johnstone was also in the top 5. By coupling Pruitt's success with Michael Andretti's pointless day, we had a new leader in the championship.
So the season had 3 races, it had 3 winners, it had 3 different chassis, engine, and tire combinations in the winner's circle. The season was still looking for some definition, some personality. Nobody had yet taken it by the throat, so a young Canadian from Team Penske volunteered.
Under threatening skies in front of a record crowd, Paul Tracy demonstrated that the Penske car for 97 was the Ovalmeister they suspected. After qualifying at better than 191 miles an hour, Tracy thoroughly dominated the race.
We knew that we were going to have a good oval car like we did the previous year. We didn't capitalize on it in '96. We could have done a lot better. We knew that.
And were determined not to let it continue in '97. Another Canadian, Greg Moore, was among the first to drop. A bump hurt his machine, and though he would continue later, he finished out of the points. Racing his black number 6 in his own backyard, Michael Andretti made a valiant effort to beat Tracy's worst nightmare all through the day. In fact, he did get through in front of the main grandstand using superior exit speed off the 4th turn. He'd barely done that and settled into a rhythm of race leader in front of a host of friendly fans when Walter Salas smacked the barrier to bring out the 4th yellow of the afternoon. A typical oval crash with car parts scattered everywhere, but the driver okay. It opened pit windows for everybody, including Michael, and his Newman Haas crew never missed a beat with fuel and tires, returning him to the track in under 12 seconds. The race was still less than a third done when Nazareth Concrete ate another car, this time Adrian Fernandez. By the time that was cleaned up, the pit stops made, Raoul Boisel was the leader. Like in Long Beach, Boisel put himself out of pit sequence in order to lead. This time the advantage lasted for 21 miles, while red-hot Mr. Tracy stalked from a few yards adrift, and blue-clad Greg Moore continued his valiant effort to drive back toward the front. Then bumper cars resumed. First, Parker Johnstone took a solo ride to the grass, squashing various accoutrements along the way. A while later, Parker tangled with Richie Hearn, both of them kissing the wall while the cars of Roberto Moreno and Raoul Boisel picked up enough trash to make sure they would contend no more. Near the end, laps running out on Michael, it was time for something desperate.
10 laps, Michael. 10 to go.
That's what competition is all about, getting more out of yourself.
Hard to get stale around here.
You can't. If you get stale, you're in the back.
Turned out that was Michael's final chance to charge before he could resaddle for another go. The yellow was out, and that's how the race ended. Juan Manuel Fangio's Toyota saw to that when it once again erupted in flames, sending him hoofing home. Paul Tracy had broken a Team Penske victory drought that stretched back to September of 1995, a stretch of 20 events. Couple that with Al Unser Jr.'s 3rd place run, and you have the first truly satisfying day at the track for Penske enthusiasts in a long, long time. And it was pretty satisfying for Andretti as well. The win escaped, but the lead in the championship did not. He took it back from Scott Pruitt, who ran 10th, with Zanardi 11th. Kart racing's second visit to Rio had a little trouble getting off the mark. Approaching the hoped-for green, there instead was yellow and broken racers everywhere. Adrian Fernandez, Dario Franchitti, and Patrick Carpentier retired. Finally up to speed, Brazilian Maurizio Gugelmin led the first 13 laps from pole, but doesn't think he was trying harder than normal just because he was racing at home.
You have to just go thinking you can win, and it would be nicer to win in Rio than it is at Milwaukee, for example, but it's still a race, it's still part of our championship, and you have to go for all of them.
Gugelmin still led when the close order drill of Paul Tracy, Roberto Moreno, and Brian Herta nearly spelled disaster. A brilliant catch by Moreno kept him off the wall, and they all went on their merry way. It turned out to be an amazing stroke of good luck for Mr. Tracy and the others, but then perhaps not nearly as amazing as this escape that we see from on board Michael Andretti's car. Through the plume of smoke, Michael got by along with several others, and Tracy was able to gather the car, his wits, and his sense of direction at about the same instant to drive back into the gaggle before he lost too much. Moments later, Gugelmin in trouble, but his luck turned sour, straight up through the marbles and into the wall for the one-time race leader. That incident also collected Roberto Moreno, as we see from on board the number 11 car. Neither of them would continue. Late in the day, Bobby Rahal had worked his way into the lead, trying desperately for his first win in the series since 1992. Trouble was that his last pit stop in the race had come with 93 racing miles to go. His strategy was clear. He would go for it. Equally clear was that he needed some help from yellow flags to save fuel. He got some of that, but not nearly enough. The first to give him a little hope was Walter Salas. The 12-lap yellow took some of the heat off, but Rahal was hardly out of the woods. He and his crew knew one more boost might do it. Michel Jourdain delivered. Still no one knew. Paul Tracy, who pitted later than Rahal, had the pressure up from just a few yards behind, forcing Rahal to use fuel, forcing him to press the pace, eventually forcing him to run dry. The definitive moment came barely over a lap from the end. Tracy rushed by, Rahal cruised to the pits for a splash of fuel that would carry him one more time around to 10th place. A crushing moment for both men that drive for Team Rahal.
You know, if I'd stopped with 10 or 15 laps to go, you know, what if, you know, you go back out, you're running 9th now, what if a yellow came out with 4 laps to go? You know, then everybody would have said, oh, you should have stayed out. You know, I mean, it was a no-win situation, really.
It's a different sense of frustration for to see your teammate have a problem like that, especially Bobby and I are close, and I think, you know, I felt it on a personal level too for him, and I mean, I got a car, I think I might have felt as bad or worse than he did. As a matter of fact, I almost cried. I felt so bad when I saw him.
Thus did Paul Tracy claim his second straight victory. Thus did he climb to the top of the championship pile. But during the drive, he had his own demons to think about, his own problems to discuss with Team Penske, because he too was a bit marginal in the tank.
It was kind of a cat and mouse deal, and we knew that he was light on fuel because he'd stopped earlier than me by a couple laps, and I was pretty marginal, so it was just a case of pushing him harder than he wanted to go, staying in his draft, you know, at all times to save fuel for myself and not using as much throttle, but keep the pressure on, and that's what made him run out of fuel.
It put Tracy's career victory total at an even dozen, and it came officially by 1.8 seconds over fellow Canadian Greg Moore, who stated flatly later he was tired of second place. Scott Pruitt grabbed another podium. It gave Tracy a 4-point edge over Pruitt in the championship. Both had launched past Michael Andretti. A brand new racetrack, 10 lead changes, threatening skies and fuel concerns all made dramatic contributions at Gateway Park for round 6 of 1997. Raul Boisel's first pole in 3 years set him up to lead the first 41 laps of 236. Yellows did slow them 3 times during Boisel's reign as race leader. Moreno bumped the wall, Blundell needed a tow, and another Toyota did its thing in spectacular fashion. While Fangio steamed, Boisel went to the pits for routine service. He would never lead again. Others followed suit, but Tracy decided he would stay on the track. He didn't need service yet, so why not lead? Maybe he could catch a break with another yellow and perhaps dominate again like he did in Nazareth. The yellow never came, and finally, after walking the walk for about 15 minutes, Tracy had to pit, and others had to lead. Was his bid for the hat trick betrayed? Alex Zanardi certainly hoped so. He took the lead from Tracy, but Greg Moore had his own ideas. He drove by Zanardi 3 laps later. Dario Franchitti took his turn on the point for 19 laps. Then Jimmy Vasser picked up the point, lasting long enough to get mail but not a permanent address. Michael Andretti took the lead away from Vasser just past half distance, setting the table for a great duel in the gray. It lasted for 66 laps before the defending Cup champion could get back around. The bid came on the back straight with Moore and Tracy looking on. Tracy and Moore swept through as well. His car ailing, Mike would finish 11th. During pit stops, Franchitti got the lead back, but his gearbox failed, and that allowed yet another Canadian to lead. Patrick Carpentier, piloting the Alumax machine of Tony Bettenhausen, was taking a gamble, much like Ray Hall in Rio. His pit strategy had him out in the lead, but on the fuel margin to get to the end. Alex Zanardi was running second, his car not quite perfect, and that was enough for Paul Tracy. The search for 3 in a row found Tracy with the fastest car on the track when it mattered most. First, he gathered up Zanardi for second. Zanardi could do little except watch Tracy's rear wing shrink in the distance. Tracy knew the rookie ahead was marginal, but it was too late for constant pressure. He had to make a move, and he did. For the second race in a row, the lead was his for the last time, less than 2 laps from the end. Tracy's career victory total swelled to a baker's dozen, and suddenly, with 3 in a row, his and Team Penske trouble that saw them winless in '96 seemed a distant memory. But they all knew that oval success might not necessarily segue into summer sensation.
You know, we've only got 6 or 7 ovals in the series and 10 road courses, so the balance is road courses. We need to try to improve them, you know, until we find what the solution is for the road courses. If we can get a car that works as well on the road courses as well as it does on the ovals, I mean, I think we'd be pretty tough to beat.
Paul Tracy's margin of victory over fuel-conserving Carpentier was nearly 2.5 seconds, all gained in a mile of racing. Carpentier's gift to his new boss, Tony Bettenhausen, was that team's best finish ever. Paul Tracy's lead in the championship extended to 18 points, while all 5 names in the top 5 were the same.
Paul Tracy's win at St. Louis was number 99 for Team Penske all time. And with Milwaukee on the horizon, another oval, it looked like number 100 might be immediately gained. However, while a Canadian did the deed at the famed Milwaukee Mile, it was a different number 99, a different Canadian, driving the Forsyth racer that set his own milestone.
America's oldest operating major speedway produced the youngest winner in kart history when Greg Moore handled the Milwaukee Mile on an afternoon when a fuel gamble finally paid off. It thwarted Paul Tracy's bid for a 4th straight, a bid that launched from the pole. In fact, Tracy and Moore were the only leaders in the entire event, changing hands 5 different times. The first change, 40 miles in at full speed. With traffic looming ahead, Moore would stay there for the next 15 miles before something on the track went awry. It was a sliding race car. The culprit, Parker Johnstone, up against the barrier. That touched off a round of pit stops and led to a Penske pit victory in that Tracy was sent back to the track in the lead. Paul Tracy led the next 30, then Moore got him back, sailing along for 23 more miles, with Tracy hounding and Michael Andretti closing. Then the moment that set up the gamble, Juan Fangio and Walter Salas in lockstep to the wall. It took a moment, but both drivers did exit uninjured. 92 miles from the end, Greg Moore went to the pit for his final stop. So did Paul Tracy. So did others, including Bobby Rahal, all looking for something special, something hard to find.
It's amazing when we have so many different combinations and they all run nose to tail. It's hard on the drivers and on the teams as well, because it's all about how can you get that little edge? Where is that little edge? And each weekend, that edge could be in a different place.
Moore was trying to make 92 miles to the end. Rahal had tried 93 at Rio and missed. Moore needed yellows and got one from Max Pappas. It lasted 13 laps. Would it help enough? Forsythe people thought so, but Penske plotters did not and called their man in. Tracy Wood finished 6th. Jimmy Vasser was still a contender, but Michael Andretti was more so, as he drew up on Moore and kept the pressure building for 66 miles, hoping to force the Canadian to run the tanks dry. He almost did.
I had the dash alarms going, saying, you're going to run out of fuel, you're going to run out of fuel. You know, every team leaves themselves a little bit of a window there. And so it was kind of like from the mirror back down to the dash to see how much fuel I had to the racetrack and sort of going to all three.
A pilot scan that went uninterrupted through the final lap, the final mile, the final couple of corners until he had the nose pointed at the flag stand and finally knew his breakthrough moment had arrived. It made Greg Moore the youngest driver ever to win a kart event. 21 years, 1 month, and 10 days. It was also the first victory for the Players Forsythe team, which was born in 1995. His bold bid of 92 miles on one tank was aided by 29 laps under the yellow. Andretti went 14th to 2nd, while Vasser notched his 24th consecutive finish, dating back to the 1995 season. Paul Tracy's late slip backward did not cost him the lead in the championship. In fact, it only shrunk 4 points. Shall we discuss fuel gambles and bad luck one more time? We really have no choice. The first bad luck came Sunday morning with news that points leader Paul Tracy would not drive because of cervical muscle spasms. The last bit came late Sunday afternoon when 2 men ran out of fuel. Pole man Gilles de Ferran led the bobbing and weaving articulated snake through the first 27 laps, while just behind 2 other retirements of great importance. Scott Pruitt lost an engine and was parked. Alex Zanardi hit the wall and retired. De Ferran's first pit stop put first Roberto Moreno, then Dario Franchitti into the lead for a short time. Almost immediately, Richie Hearn touched off another round of pit stops. Sensational work by the Forsythe crew put Moore back on course in the lead, with Mauricio Gugelmin and Mark Blundell in close proximity. They were all 90 miles from the checker. Would they try? The answer to the Moore riddle came 55 miles from home when the day's last yellow flew. He came back out in 3rd place. He was followed by Michael Andretti, Jimmy Vasser, Gilles de Ferran. All of them had plenty of fuel and fresh tires, but had few passing opportunities left. The 2 from Pac West, Gugelmin and Blundell, were rolling the dice. Could they make 90 miles on one tank of fuel? Belle Isle history suggests they should have made it, but history can be a deceitful lady. Her ultimate betrayal this sunny June day did not come until the last possible moment, with only a mile to go. First, Mauricio Gugelmin slowed. He would finish 16th out of fuel.
I thought, oh, this is good. This is really good. And you know, so I thought 2nd. That's a whole lot better than 3rd. And then you know, honestly, I knew that I was faster than Mark coming out of the last turn up the pit straight, coming in towards the checkered flag. But you know, so I sort of set myself. I backed off a little bit going into the 2nd to last turn to try and get a good run on him.
It was a tactic that became academic. Moore did not need it because Mark Blundell's tank was also dry. First Moore, then Andretti darted by, while Pac West owner Bruce McCall looked on in disbelief. 2 in a row for the young Canadian, the youngest kart driver ever to do that. Michael finished 2nd, Gilles de Ferran rescued 3rd in a crowd. The unbridled joy in the Forsythe pit stood in stark contrast to the silence just a few yards away. But who could blame them? It was one of the most intriguing strokes of good luck for a racer that anyone could remember, and one of the most crushing moments of bad luck for a single team in recent memory. Literally 100 yards from the ultimate racing goal, all that was left was for Blundell to toss the wheel aside and launch the walk back to the pits, a mere 100 yards away.
You know, what you got to remember is the race historically has always had a yellow flag situation in the latter part. That race didn't. We ran nearly 40 laps with no yellow, and amazingly we got nearly to the end of it. And I still feel to this day that was the right decision. We still went for it. You know, we still made the decision. You know, you got to live by the sword and die by it in certain respects. But I think we proved a point.
The point being that Pac West was ready to join the ranks of elite teams, and they did before season's end. But in Detroit, the joy lay elsewhere as well as the points. It certainly squeezed things at the top, now just 9 between Tracy and Moore, while Pruitt's pointless day dropped him again from the top 5.
And so with the championship restructured, the series turned eyes west to Portland, Oregon. Pac West recovered, and rain tire warfare wrote a new chapter in parody.
On a day hardly fit for man or beast, Scott Pruitt led the rain-soaked charge off the line, the only man in line who could truly see what lay ahead, and he was able to hold the advantage through the opening 4 laps on his Firestone rain tires. By lap 4, up from position 4, Mauricio Gugelmin, also on Firestones, hopped past Pruitt for the primary position, beating by just a short while the yellow posted because of standing water. A third of the way through, Gugelmin gave up the lead. Not through guile on the racetrack, but head-to-head, crew-to-crew in the pits. The advantage swung to Alex Zanardi, whose Ganassi bunch picked Pac West's pocket. The 4th of 7 yellows for the day flew at the chicane. Dario Franchitti and Al Unser Jr. tried for the same pavement in tandem. They went to the tires, their ghastly reward, both drivers okay. Rookie Walter Salas demonstrated his nimble nature amidst a fume of smoke, and later, more yellow. This involving the gurney-entered car of P.J. Jones. It was the final yellow of the day. Zanardi pulled out of the lead for pit service. He would never get back to P1. Gugelmin, then Blundell, then Gilles de Ferran exchanged the lead during pit stops and otherwise, through 45 miles of all-out assault on a drying track. With 11 laps to go, de Ferran had the lead. He thought he had it covered.
The reason why I was leading the last 10 laps, it was brilliant strategy from the team. Right from the early part of the race, we were calling for a time race because we knew that the lap time and the number of laps weren't adding up together. So we made our calculations according to that. And, you know, we guessed exactly right how many laps there was to go, and the right decision to stay on the wet tires.
While it was almost the right decision, Mark Blundell, unable to catch de Ferran while both were wearing rain tires, gambled there would be no more precipitation. He went for slicks, took off in pursuit, and came up with the closest finish in the history of IndyCar racing. At the line, the margin, 27/100ths of a second. If only he'd known the dash on the front straight was for victory.
John Anderson, the guy who calls my race, our team manager, he knows me pretty well now. He calls my races and knows the feel for what I'm doing out on the track. He knew that whoever was in front of me, I was going to go and pass. He didn't need to tell me who was the leader. He just knew that whoever it was, I was going to go by him. And that's pretty much what it was. I mean, Gilles was the next guy in line for me. He was the next one gone.
It was Blundell's first win in kart and first race win of any sort since Le Mans of 1992. It certainly helped erase the bitter memory of Detroit. In third place, Raul Boisel, just 55/100ths of a second from Blundell, while Christian Fittipaldi celebrated his return from injury with 4th. It left Greg Moore just 5 points behind Paul Tracy, who scored 7th at Portland. Vassar finished out of the points. In the shadow of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at Cleveland's Burke Lakefront Airport, Alex Zanardi took a roller coaster ride of magnificent proportions prior to capturing his second victory of the year. Pole position had Zanardi in the catbird seat through the first third of the race. Gilles de Ferran was in game pursuit, and so was Christian Fittipaldi, but they couldn't run him down. So he ran himself down. Richie Hearn looped in front of the pits and brought out the yellow flag. Alex Zanardi, leading the single file line, dove for the pits, and though his team did react properly, did give him more than adequate service, the fact is he had ignored a very important sign back up the road. The big P means pits closed. Zanardi wasn't the only driver to make that error, but when he rejoined the field, he was the only one to blend in properly. The penalties, plural, put him in 22nd place, predicating a breathtaking charge through the field. Over the course of the next 37 laps, Gilles de Ferran, Mark Blundell, and Christian Fittipaldi passed the lead around, while Zanardi picked them off 1 by 1. Sometimes he picked them off 2 by 2. As they fell away each in his turn, a race strategy forced on Zanardi by his penalties began to hand him a tactical advantage.
We decided to pit again before it went green. We had nothing to lose. We were last already, and we put on board that extra amount of fuel that allowed us to go hot all the rest of the race, where other people were trying to conserve gas.
By making his last pit stop under green later than the others, Zanardi was in position to run full boost through the final laps while the others could not. Gilles de Ferran was caught in that predicament, a fact made more than evident as Zanardi closed in and finally stormed by the man in blue and white. With 6 laps to go, the verdict was a given. Zanardi in a rush with more than enough. Arguably the most dramatic and well-executed come-from-behind drive for any winner in the history of kart racing. Certainly a major accomplishment that Alex readily admits belongs to a lot of people.
When you are able to put everything together and finally direct all the effort of everybody, every single member of the team in the same way, in the same direction, you normally get good results, especially if you have a bit of luck.
Zanardi's win, his first since Long Beach, was also the first for Honda since Long Beach, breaking a 6-race streak by Mercedes. Paul Tracy was never a factor in terms of the win, but did score some points and gain some ground in the championship. A previously demonstrated flair for awesome bursts of speed gave Dario Franchitti his first pole at Toronto's exhibition place, but the race hope that generally brings was dashed in short order. Approaching the first turn in a sandwich between Rahal and Blundell, the young Scotsman had few options, and no one else had much to work with either.
Bobby knew he had to get past the first corner, and he really went for it. And eventually we got into a situation where you know, he was hard on the brakes trying to get out of it. I was trying to get out of his way, but you know, it just eventually we came together. He was too committed to pull out, I think, and you know, I had Mark on my outside had to be. You know, that was the sort of the meat in the sandwich, if you like.
Franchitti's misfortune allowed Mark Blundell onto the point, launching what was perhaps the most dominant single-day performance so far in the season, turning lap after lap flawlessly, while all the other pretenders singled out behind, essentially fighting for second place. It was perfectly clear who was in charge. Points leader Paul Tracy qualified 14th on his way to 10th place. He struggled with the Penske throughout the day, all the while fighting to keep the championship lead. Only the first round of pit stops could drag Blundell off the point. A valiant try by Alex Zanardi's crew to get him the lead with a pit stop failed this time. Dario Franchitti wound up his day against the barrier, bringing out the local yellow. Greg Moore ended against the barrier as well after leading a lap during pit stop exchanges. His demise came in front of the Prince's Gate at turn 1 while swinging around traffic exiting the pits. One of the breaks of the game, yes, avoidable, probably, but not deliberate, which was the case so often in 1996.
You know, I would have to say that this year, I think the drivers respect each other a little bit more. You know, we respected each other last year, but on a different kind of level. I think we all respect each other as drivers, but more so, you know, now we look at the safety aspects of things.
Some of these guys who were pretty irresponsible, I felt last year, probably have finally the lights gone on, you know, and I think, geez, if I don't finish the race, I don't have a chance of winning it. So I think some of these people are the ones that were generally a problem, I think, have matured.
By the second pit stop at Toronto, Blundell was so in control he never gave up the lead. He did, in fact, lead 93 of the 95 laps in the race. And even toward the end, with Alex Zanardi breathing on him, hoping for a mistake, he made it look easy. A walk in the park.
That was probably one of the best races of my career. From my early years, I've had some races like that, but we're talking about small formulas, 10, 15 lap races. This is top level international motor racing, and we led from start to finish.
With 2 wins in 3 races since Detroit, it was suddenly looking as though Blundell and Pac West might move into the championship hunt very soon. They were certainly on a roll, and so was Zanardi, whose second place at Exhibition Place carried him from 5th to 2nd in the points, within 3 of now deeply troubled Paul Tracy. Michigan did not necessarily define the 1997 season, but it did provide the springboard for the new champion on a day that was heavily laden with attrition and scary moments. And it also had some sensational duels. Scott Pruitt and Mauricio Gugelmin were at each other's throats in the lead battle through most of the first segment. 2 veteran campaigners working a close order drill that could only confirm how deep mutual trust and confidence between drivers has to be. Parker Johnstone leapt through the high groove and into the wall, a bruising ride that brought out the yellow for 11 minutes and was a portent of things to come. The race renewed. It was Pruitt and Andretti for bragging rights. Those two swapped it back and forth a couple of times before Michael's car finally gave up.
Okay, then I'm coming in. And it looks terminal. Let's bring it in. Okay, 10-4. The gearbox. They can't get it out of gear.
Just a lot of things that kept us out of victory lane. That you know, at the 2 races where I finished second, all we needed was one more lap in both races, and I probably would have won them. You know, it's just that sort of thing, that sort of year for me.
The attitude of a winner. Back on the track, Alex Zanardi was suddenly the factor to be reckoned with. Up from 7th, he snatched the lead from veteran Bobby Rahal. Just a few ticks of the clock before Rahal's car got away and left him wondering what might have been. During that yellow, Christian Fittipaldi was forced onto the grass. Someone had not tightened a wheel very well during the course of what should have been a routine pit stop. Raul Boycel's transmission hemorrhage took him away from the racing surface, while his teammate Scott Pruitt fought his way back to the front one more time. Tracking down rookie Patrick Carpentier looked easy as the Brahma machine slashed through, with Paul Tracy trailing in close order drill. The Pruitt-Tracy fight did not last long, at least not too long, but Pruitt was hardly off the hook. Alex Zanardi was on the move, and he got past the former Michigan winner Pruitt with just under 200 miles left. And from that point forward, the day belonged to Mr. Zanardi, while the day went completely south for Mr. Pruitt. Zanardi gave up the lead briefly for his final pit stop. That let Tracy and Gilles de Perrin battle for the false lead for a while. And de Perrin even had a chance to keep the lead if he could get the best pit stop of his career. But it didn't quite work out. He was on the move, building speed on cold tires when Zanardi zipped down the straight at full song. Tires warm and plenty of fuel on board. He took charge again. Also in the mix was Mark Blundell. He looked for a while like he might catch Alex.
Mark is a very special challenger for me, because he's the kind of guy that didn't have a very easy start. His background is in Formula One. He had the possibility to drive for very good teams, but on the wrong period. So he's the kind of guy that is very hungry.
Zanardi's first oval victory was the 6th overall of his career, 3rd overall in 1997. Suddenly, heating up in the second half, just like he did in 1996, made Zanardi's chance for the championship seem like more than just a dream. Second place Blundell was 32 seconds back, while Tracy finally gathered in some significant points, though not enough to keep Zanardi from taking the lead in the championship by a half a dozen. De Perrin moved past Michael into 3rd. The Michigan win for Zanardi was a major step forward in his rapidly expanding resume. Atop the points for the first time in his career, the thoughtful Italian set out to absorb the championship with a flourish, and he figured that 4 straight races on more familiar ground just might do the trick. Across the gently rolling hills of mid-Ohio, Zanardi's stretch drive began. His victory wasn't quite as complete as that of Blundell at Toronto, but it didn't miss by much. First, you have to understand that he did not get the lead in the first corner. Riding Firestones, he was chasing Goodyear's Brian Herta, to the surprise of many.
The problem with the tire situation right now is that if there's maybe one of 6 guys on Goodyear's, when you're right, you're one of 6 people right, but when you're wrong, you're one of 6 people who are wrong, and there's 17 guys that are right. And so you have to, that has probably, right now, the tire situation has the greatest effect on the performance of any single entity out there, or even more so than engine, chassis, you name it.
The first man to breathe trouble into the day was Patrick Carpentier with an opening lap loop. Turned out Paul Tracy had made contact with another during the opening lap. His car was pointlessly ruined. Up front, Zanardi kept the pressure up, chasing Herta from just a few feet behind through the first 18 trips around. While Herta was undaunted, his tires were inadequate, at least the left rear. Magnificent driving kept it pointed in the right direction, but the tire beat the suspension into submission. He would retire, and teammates would mourn the moment.
I think he was pulling it off. I mean, frankly, I think, he was driving the car in such a way that the tires were going to hang together, and I think only Brian was capable of doing that, the way he drives. Unfortunately, he never got the chance to show how good a decision it was that he'd made, and in terms of qualifying on the soft tire.
I hopped out of the car and everybody was cheering and waving, and I mean, it kind of brought me up in a way right away. You know, just made me realize, you know, hey, this is something that's out of my control, out of the team's control. We did everything right this weekend.
The mantle of doing everything right then passed to Zanardi, and he wore it well. 2 laps after he took the lead, Zanardi ducked into the pits for a scheduled stop under the yellow. He escaped the pits just before Gilles de Perrin got sideways to the correct direction. Officials squared that away in short order, but de Perrin would settle for 6th. Zanardi was forced to chase Mauricio Gugelmin from 2nd for a few laps until Big Mo ducked out of line. Zanardi resumed the lead and never gave it up over the last 120 miles. The Reynard-Honda Firestone combination perhaps had never run better. On the occasion of his 2nd stop, run perfectly by his crew, 2nd place Greg Moore was on pit road with him. But with both crews at full song, the standings did not change. Then with Moore on a fuel conservation strategy, Zanardi's people decided to use full boost, build the lead up and pit once more for a splash. The strategy worked to perfection. The splash and go lasted 5 seconds. He retained the lead. And while Moore was able to get back close enough in the keyhole to see Zanardi's back wing, there wasn't much he could really do, as the Alex freight train built even more momentum. And Target Chip Ganassi Racing continued to demonstrate that they are the most formidable force in kart today. Zanardi's win was his 2nd straight on the Mid-Ohio course. In 1996, his Mid-Ohio win was a huge part of his Rookie of the Year standing. This time, he had championship on his mind. 2nd place to Moore, 4.9 seconds back, his 5th podium of the season, while Rahal, running his home track, came up with his 1st podium since Vancouver '96. The lead in the championship grew from a half dozen to 27 points. On a wet track under gray skies and after a 3-hour delay at Road America, Mauricio Gugelmin finally led the field under the flag and into the first turn. Most everybody got through the corner, but not everybody. Walter Salas sideways and traffic all around. Paul Tracy had nowhere to go and wound up dangerously on his head. Perhaps no better symbolism in terms of what had happened to his season could be found. Once righted, Tracy climbed out of the cockpit. He was shaken, but uninjured. Up front, Gugelmin, a man still searching for his first kart win, made the pace. His nearest competition was from teammate Mark Blundell, followed by 2nd-row starters Zanardi and Franchitti. That lasted 9 laps. Then, headed west in the fog, the only thing certain was that Pac West would lead at the next corner. It was Blundell. The track was drying, and Michael Andretti pulled the trigger on a tire switch first. Risky? Yes. Too risky? Evidently. Stuck in the sand trap, there was no relief available. Did he regret the tire call? Perhaps. Would he do it again? Probably.
There always is a risk, but you always look for that advantage, you know, because that's what it's all about, getting an advantage, and that's why if you don't take a risk, you'll never have that, you know. So there's times when I've gotten burnt, and there's other times where it's paid off for me.
Mid-Ohio hard luck trooper Brian Herta led for a bit during pit stops until he went in, setting up a frantic duel between Blundell and Zanardi. Into the first turn. No change. It was the same turn that would bite a moment later. Andre Ribeiro and Raul Boisel to the side of the road, into the sand trap, from which there was no rescue. 40 miles later, the decisive moment set up when Greg Moore got himself stuck in the sand. Once again, the young Canadian would not score any points and would end the day just 9 points from championship elimination. While he sat there, the leaders hit the pit, and Zanardi's crew won the race. Blundell tucked into his stall first. His service was just fine, but Alex's bunch did it a little quicker, and he jumped back to the track in first place. Amazing work, to be sure, but not the first time that it had happened.
You couldn't really buy that out of people because, I mean, you could pay people as much as you want, but you wouldn't get out of them how much you can get when they're really motivated and they go for something because they really want and they're determined to get it.
Though hardly more determined than Alex himself, his guys had given him the lead. He dare not give it up. The Zanardi cause was helped further when Blundell's car erupted in flame, though by then it was academic. Given the chance, Alex Zanardi usually holds up his part of the bargain, and this day was no different. Threading his way through the kettle-arranged geography of central Wisconsin, he was on rails, and win number 5 of the year was concluded in the early evening of a gloomy day. And then, risking the anger of officials, including fines and suspensions, Zanardi put on his baker's hat to deliver with gusto, if you please, his now customary salute to victory.
I saw the fans, they stood there all the distance. I mean, they were wet in the stands, waiting for the race to get going, and at the end they were still there. So I had to show them my appreciation of their staying there. So I decided, okay, I gotta do it. I just hope that my judgment of a safe place to do these donuts is gonna be the same as card officials. So.
Then with little delay, donuts done and his tires cooked, off to victory lane, where young Mr. Zanardi would accept the accolades once again alongside a disappointed but game Maurizio Gugelmin and Gilles de Ferran. He would also discover that his lead in the championship had grown to 38 points. He was, in fact, within just a few points of clinching the title. Over the concrete ribbon of Concord Pacific Place, Alex Zanardi wasted no time trying to finish off the championship. Perhaps he should have taken his time and let it come, but he had pole and the lead early on. An early sign of trouble was the presence of Dennis Vitolo in the runoff. He got there after colliding with Paul Tracy, whose crippled racer barely carried him out of harm's way. It did carry him to the realization he could no longer win the title. Michael Andretti, virtually out of the championship, was driving well and pressure-free. Zanardi perhaps feeling the pressure, though. His first mistake was on lap 15, off at the hairpin while stalling the car. It took a moment to get him going, and he lost every position on the track, while Bobby Rahal took over on the point, a position he enjoyed for 10 laps while fighting off the likes of Jimmy Vasser, Maurizio Gugelmin, and Michael Andretti. Then his car quit on him, turning what had been a fun day into a rather sour exercise. That left Vasser in the lead until he came to the pits, and that left Gugelmin to lead, at least for a little bit, until Vasser got it back. All the while, others were learning how treacherous Vancouver really is. Michel Jourdain and Richie Hearn bumped hard. Andre Ribeiro took a ride beneath the car of Scott Pruitt. Both drivers did escape injury. In the pack, Zanardi was on a charge, working his way back through to the points first, then into the top 10, resolving fight after fight against quality opposition with dispatch, often forcing the opposition into a mistake that would end their day. Other things ended races. Andretti's car was switched off in the pits after contact. Vasser led 47 of 49 laps through the middle of the race, but his pit stop on lap 75 took him out of the lead and he would never lead again. Maurizio Gugelmin led a couple of laps, barely holding on against Zanardi. De Ferran led a lap, and then Brian Herta had the point in the midst of skipping a pit stop and trying to stretch a load of fuel over the last 81 miles. Then Alex made another mistake and sat begging for help and one last chance to get into the fight, while team owner Chip Ganassi sat hoping that he was not watching a championship gone awry. Zanardi got going again, a lap down, and right next to race leader Brian Herta. Regrettably, his third error of the day left the victim ultimately the philosopher.
Yeah, I was angry. I was very angry at the time with Alex, but you know, by the same token, you know, what are you going to do? You know, you get mad, you can go, you know, you can go beat up on the guy. What's that going to accomplish for you? The only thing that I really cared about was, you know, trying to win that race, and that was already gone.
Herta was able to drive to an 8th place finish, and while he motored to 4th, Zanardi was fined $25,000 for his action and placed on probation for the remaining 2 races of the season. At the front, Mauricio Gugelmin's quest for win number 1 seemed about to end. His record of bad luck over the years virtually insisted that this time he hold up, the car hold up, the atmosphere hold up. Through 14 laps, he totally controlled the race, but certainly had to fight to control his emotions. During his 4.5-year kart career, he'd been so close before, but nothing like this.
At the end, when it was 7 laps to go, 8 laps to go, that was it, you know. I'm gonna get this one. But those 7 laps felt like a month and a half of waiting, you know, it was a long time.
It was the 3rd win of the year for Pac West Racing, all recorded since the double-dip disaster at Detroit. A margin of victory over second-place Jimmy Vasser, less than 3 seconds, with Gilles de Ferran in the final podium spot. Al Unser Jr. finished 5th, using the same pit strategy that nearly won the race for Herta. The win thrust Gugelmin into the top 5, but only one contender was left that could stop Zanardi. In spite of the cloud of probation hanging over Alex Zanardi, Team Ganassi was able to double its pleasure at Laguna Seca. Back at the site upon which Jimmy Vasser clinched his 1996 title, they watched as Zanardi took his, though at the beginning there was some thought that the building rivalry between Zanardi and Brian Herta sharing the front row would provide some fireworks. Well, there were some, but they were fireworks that would come from any pair of competitors in any race, dueling nose to tail, hammer and tong for the advantage. Zanardi's first bid for the lead came just after the corkscrew. It wasn't quite good enough, and Alex called off the shell game, at least for the moment, in front of his owner's grin of approval. Alex then spent a little more time sizing up his man through the top of the course and went for it again at the hairpin at the bottom of the hill. Herta would simply have none of it. Neither, typically, gained benefit from crossing swords. Scott Pruitt did, though, over the short term. He picked up the lead and held on to the post position until pit stops were due. Meantime, Paul Tracy's season to forget wrote another chapter of woe with a broken motor. Jimmy Vasser had suddenly inherited the lead. Turned out he had the best car at the track, and he rambled through the next 130 miles of competition without giving up the position. Even when he went to the pits, he got back out ahead of Pruitt and held him off while bringing heat into the tires. Running 3rd, all Alex Zanardi really needed to do was keep Gilles de Ferran behind him. He was doing that. In fact, the only ones pressing him were Gugelmin and Blundell. De Ferran was much further adrift. Blundell did get through in the late going, and Zanardi tempted fate like he does so often, but he got away with it. Others did not. Greg Moore's mount finished the day amidst smoke and flames. Vasser had to at least breathe heavily before he claimed his first win of the year. Blundell was flying and closing as the laps ran out, and there was legitimate concern on the pit stand during the last couple of miles. But Jimmy Vasser did his job. His first victory since the US 500 in May of 1996. The margin over Blundell, a half second, with Zanardi in 3rd, the championship assured. A moment of extreme pleasure for the owner. And before the team left Laguna, they wrote an hilarious Boys Will Be Boys chapter. The photo op turned flop when teammates touched at less than flank speed, and the race long since done. In this instance, Chip Ganassi did not care, and Zanardi was definitely not in jeopardy of violating his probation. For the record, the top 5 went this way. One of the best drives of the year for Andre Ribeiro, who had captured 3rd at Toronto for Tasman after they dumped the Lola and bought a Renard. Also for the record, with 1 race to go, Zanardi was the champion at 195 points. He didn't know it, but that's all he would get. Make no mistake, that was the rule at Fontana. Those that broke the rule paid dearly. First, Rookie of the Year Patrick Carpentier, out of the event with a concussion. Next, and on 2 occasions, PPG Cup champion Alex Zanardi. He sustained a mild concussion in the second of 2 wild rides into the fence. That was enough to take him out of the event. By the time they got to the show, 27 riders were ready. Though Juan Manuel Fangio retired in flames before the green. Ari Leyendijk, subbing for Zanardi, went to the pits, left a fire behind, but no one was seriously hurt. Finally, Mauricio Gugelmin, who won pole at world record 240 miles an hour, was allowed to lead the charge, which he gladly did for the first 43 laps, though it only took 13 for Paul Tracy to swap ends and nail the fence. He walked away, shaken. Lyondike's trouble had a second chapter. Arndt Meyer spun ahead. There was nowhere to go. Little time to slow. The contact, unbelievable. Lyondike was hospitalized, but not seriously hurt. The retirement of Allenser Jr. was somewhat more docile, but just as definite, with an exhaust fire in the engine compartments.
You know, it's been a couple years since I've won a race, and so sure, the frustration level has gotten up there to a point where, you know, I'm going after my first win.
By the 90th of 250 laps, 5 different men had enjoyed the lead in the race, including Michael Andretti. But overheating problems took his season to conclusion in somewhat typical and certainly less than spectacular fashion. Gilles de Ferran had his moments, leading on 3 separate occasions. He would finish 6th. Andre Ribeiro, who's won at 500 miles, took a 72-lap turn on the point before his forgiving but decisive long, lazy slide through the grass that finished the effort. Near the end, Big Mo had the point with de Ferran, Vassar, Blundell, and Moore in sight. Greg Moore launched his dash for cash against Gugelmin with 36 miles left. He got the lead with a huge burst of speed, and then a blown engine got him. At the same time, Blundell and Vassar both had gotten Mo. The dash over the last 20 miles belonged exclusively to Blundell, building his margin to 8.5 seconds over Vassar while claiming his 3rd win of the season. A most valiant closing statement for Pac West. They won 4 of the last 9 for the year, including 2 of the final 3. Calling them a co-favorite for 98 might not be far off the mark. Adrian Fernandez finished by giving Lola its only podium of the season, while Gugelmin dropped to 4th and Bobby Rahal finished the top 5. The final points were these. Zanardi, the champion, joined in the top 3 by his teammate. Walker Racing had 2nd, Pac West the next 2 spots. Forsyth backed Moore in 7th. And thus the season concluded. It was time to deliver the spoils to the winners and champions. For the 2nd year in a row, it all belongs to Team Target Ganassi. Emphasis, team.
It validates again what our team is all about, what our philosophy is all about, what the components we work with are all about, and what our philosophy is.
It's a team sport. It's so important that everybody gets along on the team, to have the chemistry working together, and otherwise you're doomed. You're never gonna have a championship team.
I may sound a bit arrogant, but I want to believe that I have something more to fight for, and maybe there will be some better ones in the future. I don't know.
So there you have it, the 1997 kart season in all her glory. A season that once again demonstrated the skill and guile and courage of the men who risked so much to drive them so fast in apparent defiance of the laws of nature. But a season that once again demonstrated that the rules of nature properly applied can bring joy and beauty and excitement to the sport. It is auto racing at its highest level. It is the PPG Kart World Series. It is indeed Speed with Style 1997. And now we look ahead to 1998. There will be 19 races around the world. Indeed, the best is yet to come. I'm Chris McClure. We'll see you at the track.